Late to class, the most unique and hilarious reasons. Story 1. This happened to me as a pupil. A very quiet, unassuming kid in our class came into German with about 5 minutes left of class. We went to a Catholic school, and the teachers were all quite strict and intimidating. Classes were usually silent, especially in junior school. When this boy came into class at the end of the lesson that day, the door flew inwards with such force that the teacher gave an audible gasp. It had been raining heavily outside. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his blazer was dripping wet, and he had mud caked into his trousers up to his knees. He was breathing heavily. The teacher exclaimed, "Brennan, what happened?" We all stared up at him in shocked silence. This quiet, unassuming little boy let out a big sigh and just said, "I took a shortcut," and went straight to his seat. That line became iconic in our school for years after. Story 2. When I was in college, my psych professor told us the only excuse for being late was a funeral procession. Any other reason, you wouldn't be allowed to come in. A few weeks into the semester, I was headed from one building to another, which involved crossing the main road. Lo and behold, there was one very long funeral procession going by. I got a short video of it as proof and stood on the sidewalk to let it pass. Unfortunately, the procession made me late for class. I knocked on the door, and the professor came over to start telling me off. I showed her the video. "Well, I'll be damned. Come on in," she said. Story 3. I'm an English professor, and one year, a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where the paper was. I genuinely believed him because he'd been a really good student. Then, over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe and was spending late nights with his cousin, driving around looking for the guy because they knew his van. The student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy to beat the crap out of him and get the safe back because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe, as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in, apologetic that it wasn't up to his usual standards, but he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a while, he came to my office hours very happy. He reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a drug den, shaking people down with baseball bats, and even bribing some escorts. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from an escort. They cornered him and waited for the police tea. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at Taco Bell. They ended up calling in the Secret Service because the thief had used cash from the safe to buy counterfeiting equipment. The Secret Service apparently investigates counterfeiting, so the whole investigation happened because this guy tracked the scumbag down. He got his wife's wedding ring, some cash, and his laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. Story 4. I was one of about 20 kids who were late for school. We showed up at the school office as a group, and when questioned why we were late, we said, "The school bus blew up." The teachers asked, "So the engine blew up?" We replied, "No, the whole bus went up in flames." There was much conference between the teachers, all of them thinking we had embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff had the news website open, showing a very obvious image of the entire bus on fire, with a bunch of Story 5. After 9/11, my small-town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months. They decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. Myself and about 5 others showed up for class, and every teacher said something like, "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made to read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious. In the most down-south accent you can imagine, it went something else. Story 6. Not school-related, but I got robbed at gunpoint, and my car was stolen the previous night. I was talking to cops and detectives until the early hours of the morning, but being the dedicated corporate slave I am, I still showed up to work the next day, albeit an hour late. Even in public accounting, They understood. Looking back, I probably should have taken the day off. If anything, this made my coworkers think I'm crazy for brushing it off and coming into work. Story 7. I'm not a teacher, but I work in administration at a music school. One time, a mom frantically called me and let me know that her daughter might be late for her guitar lesson because she couldn't find the kid. An hour later, the mom called back saying she found her daughter, but the kid had decided to dye her hair green at a friend's house. They lived close by, so they still made it to the lesson, albeit 5 minutes late, with the kid sporting bright green hair. It actually looked pretty rad. Story 8. In high school, I was constantly late to one class because I had depression and was on a 504 plan that allowed me extra time between classes. One day, I witnessed a car hit a pedestrian crossing the road, severely injuring him, and the car drove away. My brother, who is into cars, recognized the car and identified the driver as our neighbor, who was also in our first period. I called an ambulance for the pedestrian and informed the school. When I got to class, I handed the teacher a note explaining everything. The driver, who was sitting in the back of the classroom, looked scared. My teacher didn't believe my story until the school resource officer came in and took the driver out of class for a hit and run.